Hello good people, welcome to my YouTube channel. Before we start on today's video, let's just acknowledge what is happening in our country and in this universe generally of late. So just last week it was announced that coronavirus has finally found its way into Kenya, and before that we knew that in so many other parts of the world people are also affected by this virus. So I'm just out here encouraging all of us to first not panic. When you panic, your adrenaline levels go high. When they go high, you stop thinking rationally, which means you'll start making decisions that can affect not only yourself but the people around you. So remain calm. It will help you in thinking. So the other thing that I'd like to encourage all of us to do is what we've been advised by the World Health Organization and by our government and various governments, depending with where you're watching from. Wash your hands, maintain a high level of hygiene at this time. I am meant to understand that the virus enters the body through the body openings, which are the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth, and nowhere else. Just take care of yourself. Don't keep touching yourself because that's the only way you'll transfer the virus into your body. So be very careful and be very clean. And even when you don't have a sanitizer, soap and water will work the magic as well. Just keep washing your hands every time. The other thing that I'd like to say specifically to Kenyans, because I'll tell you what I love about my countrymen, is we are very spirited people. We don't take things so seriously. But you can almost tell in the environment around us that people have really panicked. People are really thinking that this is it. But I think Kenyans really forget quickly, because just a few years ago we had another pandemic in the country. It was cholera, and it affected mostly the people of Nyanza region and also the people of Busia, and we lost so many lives. It was very unfortunate, but we pulled through that one. We pulled through it and we came out of it stronger. So I'm just trying to say that even now it might sound like things are really difficult, but we will pull through it. If God purposes for us to be here, we will be here and we'll pull through it. So put on your strength, put on your courage. We'll do this, okay? We'll go through this. It's just another hurdle and we'll also go through it. Anyway, away from that, let's talk about how to become better writers and better speakers. Many people assume that writing, being good at writing, being good at public speaking is a skill that cannot be acquired. It's either a gift that you have from birth or a talent. And that is a very wrong assumption, because we can all agree that while it's very difficult to notice a child's talent or gifts when they are still toddlers, something that we all have in common in this world is that when we are born, we are neither able to speak or to write. It's something that we learn, and we know there are people in this world, in their adult lives, who can still not write even their basic names. They're not able to write. So this is only to prove that this is a skill that can actually be learned. It's something that you can learn. You can learn how you speak, you can learn how you write. And just because I'm on this topic, I did a video explaining how your surrounding or the people in your environment affect how you become a writer. So go check it out. It will make more sense when you relate that video to this video. They actually make sense together. So now this is something I've actually been reading in the comments, whether here on YouTube, whether on my blog. People have given comments on my writing style or my speaking style. And most of them have the assumption that I speak the way I speak or I write the way I write because it's a gift, or because I started writing at a young age, or I started speaking in public at a young age, which is to some extent true and to some extent not true. As I have said, this is a skill that can be learned. And I will tell you for sure, if you compare the way I speak and the way I write now, and if I gave you records of how I wrote previous years back, and by then I should just do a separate video showing you some of the articles I wrote so many years back, you will see a very significant difference in that. And that is because over the years I've learned to grow my skill as a writer and as a speaker. Before this new era, this technological era, this era of elite people, survival skills were more important than literacy. So you'll find people who are generally street smart. They didn't go to school, they might not know how to write, they might not be eloquent in the way they speak, but they know how to survive. If they need to light a fire to make food, they will have the fire lit. You know, if they need to go get food, they know how to get their food. If they need to sleep, they know how to get shelter for themselves and things like that. But now with this new era, part of the survival skills has become being literate, knowing how to speak and how to write. Further than that, especially for people who want to venture into any field of communication, into digital entrepreneurship, into any field where you need to interact with people, then the skill of writing and the skill of speaking has also become very important assets. The first tip is listen to people speak your language of interest. It's not necessarily that you could only be interested in English. You could be interested in Swahili or in Arab or in German or in Spanish, whatever language you're interested in becoming good at, either as a writer or a speaker. The first step is to listen to people speak that language. Take note of diction, because most of the times the things that affect our speaking is our accent. So if you can get the diction right, then you should be able to be in the right direction on getting the language. The second tip is to imitate or emulate these people. So you're listening to people speak, you're watching how they behave, how their mouth moves, where they put commas, where they put full stops in their way of speaking. Start emulating what they were saying. Start trying to speak like them. It will help you become perfect in the skill. Now, just the other day, I was seeing something on Instagram where a girl from Uganda came up with a British accent, and it was crazy because in this video, she seemed to be convinced that she just woke up and she had a British accent. She couldn't remember how she had it, basically. Well, while it sounds crazy, sometimes the way you perfect a skill is actually by imitating people. So when you imitate people, you become better at that. I'm not necessarily saying a British accent, you know. If you want a Luya accent, for instance, you just imitate them. We know people on television like Jackie Vike who speak good English and good Swahili, but when you see them acting, they're speaking like proper Luyas, you know. So what I'm trying to say is, if you want to learn, apart from listening and observing how people are speaking the language, you also need to start emulating them. When it comes to writing, the only way you will start emulating people in writing is by reading books. You can start emulating the writing style of the readers who you've been reading. For example, let me be honest. When I first started writing as a child, I was emulating a lot of writers from the People newspaper. And from there, I started emulating writers. For example, I'm a great fan of J.K. Rowling's. I'm a great fan of Margaret Ogola. I'm a great fan of Marjorie McGuire. These are people I tried to emulate their writing styles, and as a result, I became a better writer. So I'm not saying you copy word by word what they're saying, but notice their tones. Notice when they're using flashback, notice when they're using imagery, notice how they're using irony, notice if they're writing in present tense, in past tense, in present continuous tense. Notice these things and try and emulate them as well. That is how you become good at writing and at speaking. Point number 3 on how to become a good speaker and a good writer is speak the language, write an article. So you might not be good at it at first, but we all know that practice makes perfect. It might sound weird. For example, I have told you before that I'm a product of 2 different tribes in this country. And just recently, I was having a conversation with my cousin about my language skills, and she was asking me, because in our entire life, she's never had me speak either of my mother tongues. And so she was asking me if I hear when she speaks. And I was just explaining to her that I not only hear, but I can also speak. And she asked me then, how comes that when we are in gatherings at home or when we are amongst people, she doesn't hear me speaking? And so she challenged me to speak to her in one of my mother tongues, which I did, and she burst out in laughter because obviously my accent is not as great as she would want it to be or anyone would want it to be. But she asked me, how comes you don't practice? Because you know what you're saying, you're understanding the language, you're speaking the right language, you're just getting the diction wrong. So why don't you practice? And why are you so afraid to speak before us? Because we laugh at you. And I realized that's true. It's actually very true. The way I learned both my mother tongues was actually by speaking. I was very lucky that at a young age I was exposed to these languages, and the way I learned these languages is by living in an environment where people are speaking them. So I know for sure that if I practice some more, because I learned by listening to others, if I did practice, then I'm pretty sure I can become perfect at it as well. So what I'm saying is, speak the language. Make the mistake, let people laugh at you, but speak the language at the end of the day. If it's writing, make the mistakes, have spelling errors, have grammatical errors, have all these kinds of error that people make when they're writing, but keep at it, because it's only by practicing that you become perfect at something. Do not be afraid. Do not be shy. I know, and this I'm even telling myself. When you're shy, when you're afraid, when you don't have the courage to do something, it's very difficult to perfect your skill in that field. For example, many student pilots who fly for the first time, they do crash the plane. We don't hear about them because they are very tiny planes and the kind of accidents are not major accidents. Had they not tried, would they be good at flying planes? I highly doubt. So I think it's important that we try in whatever field you choose to go into. Make an effort. Gather your courage, gather your strength, speak if you have to. Write, and when you write, do not hide it to yourself, because then you'll convince yourself you're good at something, but then when you put yourself out there in the market where other writers are, you become a weaker writer. So the best way is, when you write something, you let another writer look at it, and that way you learn from it. Because what happens when another writer looks at your article, they criticize you, and when they criticize you, you never forget, you learn from it. From this video, my hope is you have picked at least one thing that you're willing to go and try practice and see if you become a good speaker or a good writer, depending with your interest. I really do value your feedback. So if there's another way you know that you can practice to become a good writer or a good speaker, let me know in the comment section below. Let us have this conversation. Until my next video. Goodbye.